Most people assume that when an avoidant man loses a safe person, he feels fine, relieved, back in control, like the pressure has finally lifted and he can breathe again. But that's not what happens. And the gap between what people assume and what's actually occurring inside him is where a great deal of unnecessary pain lives. For both of them, what follows is an indifference. It's a very specific kind of unraveling that most people never witness because they're too busy assuming he doesn't feel anything. They watch him go quiet, stay busy, move on quickly on the surface, and they conclude he simply didn't care enough. That assumption is wrong, and it costs a lot of good people the clarity they deserve. Research from the University of California found that avoidant individuals don't feel less. They suppress more. Their emotions don't disappear. They get buried under layers of self-reliance that were constructed long before you ever came into the picture. So while he looks unbothered, something very different is happening underneath the surface. He doesn't panic when she leaves. He doesn't call or chase. If anything, he seems lighter in those first few days. He returns to his routines, fills his schedule, tells himself this is exactly what he wanted. Space, simplicity, no emotional weight pulling at him. He might even feel a brief, genuine sense of relief, and he'll use that relief as evidence that he made the right call or that she was right to go. But that calm isn't peace. It's protection. It's his nervous system doing what it was trained to do from a very early age, shutting the emotional door before anything painful can walk through it. Avoidant attachment doesn't develop randomly. It develops in environments where emotional needs were met with distance, dismissal, or inconsistency. So the child learned to need less, or at least appear like he needed less. The man, he became carried that same strategy into every relationship he ever had. Functioning is not the same as feeling, and what he hasn't yet dealt with is quietly building pressure beneath the surface. To understand what he actually loses, you first have to understand what she truly was to him. Not just a partner, not just someone he cared about. She was something far more specific and far more rare. Emotional stability, without pressure. The one person who didn't make him feel like he was constantly failing at closeness. Most people in his life, without meaning to, communicated that his emotional distance was a problem to be fixed. They pushed for more vulnerability. They got frustrated when he shut down. They took his silences personally and made their hurt visible in ways that confirmed his deepest fear. That intimacy is a performance he will never be good enough at. Every time that happened, he retreated further, because the message his nervous system received was that being close means being criticized for how you're close. She was different. She accepted the pace he moved at. She didn't punish him for needing space or make her love feel like a test. He was perpetually on the verge of failing. She stayed consistent even when he went quiet. For a man who had spent most of his life bracing for emotional disappointment, that kind of steadiness wasn't just comforting, it was regulating. It calmed something in him that rarely got to be calm. He knew it on some level, even if he never said it, even if he never fully let himself lean into it, because leaning in meant needing, and needing meant being vulnerable to a loss he didn't know how to survive. The painful irony is that the very armor he built to protect himself from losing people is exactly what pushed her away. Without her, something he doesn't have a name for starts to feel louder. She was his buffer, not because she fixed anything, but because being around someone who accepted him without conditions made the weight of everyday life easier to carry. Now that weight sits entirely on him, and he lacks the internal tools to process it, because avoidant individuals are taught emotional suppression, not emotional regulation. Those are two completely different things. Suppression pushes a feeling down and holds it there. Regulation actually moves it through, acknowledges it, and releases it. Without her, the suppression begins to fail. Old loneliness surfaces. A quiet, sourceless shame. A restlessness that no amount of productivity seems to resolve. He doesn't connect any of this to her at first. He just knows something feels off, and that feeling unsettles him far more than he will ever admit. Then comes a deeper fear, and this one cuts closer to the bone. He's not afraid of being alone. He's been emotionally alone most of his life, even inside relationships. What he fears is more precise, never finding someone who will be as patient with his walls as she was. Dating again doesn't feel impossible to him. It feels hollow. He can meet someone new, He can navigate the early stages where everything is surface level and low stakes. But somewhere in the back of his mind, he already knows what's coming. The moment things get real, the moment someone starts wanting more from him emotionally, he'll feel that familiar pressure. And this time he'll know, because of her, that not everyone handles that pressure the way she did. Most people eventually grow tired of waiting for an avoidant man to open up. She somehow stayed warm without making him feel cornered, and he now has to sit with the uncomfortable question of whether he will ever find that again. Not love in general. That specific patience. That specific presence. What he had with her wasn't just comfort. It was a form of control over his own emotional experience. He could pull back when things felt like too much and return when he was ready, and she would still be there. That rhythm felt safe. It gave him the one thing avoidant people need most, the ability to regulate how much closeness they let in at any given moment. Now that's gone. He can't pull back from someone who has already left. He can't return to someone who has stopped waiting. And that loss of emotional predictability is quietly terrifying to a man who has spent his entire life organizing himself around the belief that he doesn't need anyone enough to be genuinely hurt by them. Weeks pass. He stays busy, tells himself he's moved on, and mostly believes it. Then one ordinary night, it hits him. Not loudly or dramatically, just quietly, in the middle of something completely unrelated. A song, a place they used to go, a moment where something good happens, and his first instinct is to reach for his phone to tell her. And then he remembers he can't. That's when the delayed processing begins. Avoidant attachment doesn't grieve in real time. It postpones. It stores. It waits until the defenses are down and the distractions have finally run out. Then it delivers the full weight of what was lost all at once, in a moment where there's no one to help carry it. He starts to replay things. Conversations where she tried to get closer, and he shut it down. Moments where she was clearly hurting, and he didn't know how to show up. Times she offered him something real, and he responded with distance because real felt too risky. He replays these not with anger, but with something quieter and far harder to shake, a slow, creeping regret that has nowhere to go. Beneath all of it, there is one fear that sits deeper than the rest. One he will never speak aloud, because speaking will require exactly the kind of vulnerability his entire system is built to avoid. It's not abandonment in the traditional sense. It's the recognition that the one person who ever made him feel accepted without requiring him to perform emotional availability is now unreachable. She has pulled back her warmth. She has protected herself. And the version of her that once held space for all his contradictions, his distance, his walls, his moments of almost letting her in, is no longer available to him. That is the loss he doesn't know how to hold. Because it's not just losing a relationship. It's losing the one place where he got to be exactly as emotionally limited as he was without being made to feel broken or shameful because of it. She saw him, not the version he performed for the world, but the actual him, and she stayed. Until she couldn't anymore. The heaviest part isn't the loss itself. It's the slow, unavoidable recognition that his own fear, not her patience, not her love, not anything she did or didn't do, stood between him and the one thing he actually wanted, to be known by someone and not lose him because of it. That recognition doesn't always lead to change. Sometimes it leads to more walls, more convincing himself that independence is strength and solitude is preference. But sometimes, quietly, in the moments when the defenses are down and the truth is too loud to ignore, it plants something. A question he can't stop asking himself. What if staying had been safer than leaving? What if being known wasn't a threat? What if the fear was lying to him the whole time? He may never answer that out loud. But the fact that he's asking it at all means something shifted. And that shift, however quiet and however slow, began the moment he lost the one person who made him feel like staying open was something he might actually survive.